So I'm going to talk to you about which cities are good for dating. But before I tell you my personal experiences, I want you to think about these three factors that really determine how successful you are as a guy in any city. These three factors are singles ratios, cultural adaptability, and socio-economic factors. Singles ratios are interesting because a small change in the ratio can really affect millions of people because it's kind of like a macro trend. So it changes the whole dating dynamic. Look at the singles ratio map and you'll see what I mean. In a city like San Francisco or the Bay Area, the software engineers and the singles ratio is so bad for men that it's very difficult to compete. Whereas in Miami and New York, there are more single women than men. I've personally visited all of these cities and you can tell when you go out, like the power dynamic shifts in social situations, you know? I'll tell you two quick examples of what I mean by this. So I was living in the Bay Area while I was working in the tech industry and I was there for about 7 years. And I remember that I was just feeling kind of lost because my game was improving, but I was only getting girls that I thought was like okay, but I wasn't breaking through. I took a vacation to Brazil. And I went there for a wedding and I visited this little city and I went to a wedding, and in that city there was a 2-to-1 female to male ratio, and I stayed there for about a month just to get to know the place. And what I learned was incredible because in Brazil I was at the wedding and I was sitting at this table and I saw this girl who was a spitting image of Adriana Ambrosio, and I couldn't believe it because she was there with a very regular looking guy. And then I was like, I gotta figure this out. So I started talking to them and I found out their story. She had met him because they were both working as like at the front desk at the gym. And they met and they started dating. And I was asking the bride, who was a friend of mine, I said, what is going on here? How did that guy get this girl? She's literally a Victoria's Secret model status. And she was like, oh yeah, it happens all the time here in this city. And she's like, because, I don't know if it's a water or what, but there's so many hot girls here that the guys don't have to do anything. Like, look at my brother. Like, all the guys have no jobs. They're not doing anything with their lives. They're kind of like losers in the States if you think about it, if you move into the States. But because the girls here are so beautiful and there's so many of them, they don't have a choice. And so that's what happens. And I'm like, I cannot believe this. I spent a few weeks there and I got to see it for myself. It was literally girls everywhere and they were all hot. And the whole ratio completely shifted. So now girls, because of the ratio, really hot girls have to compete for guys that were average. Okay, and after a while, your brain starts wiring and start thinking these guys are actually really high value because you're just seeing that every day. When I got back home from this Brazil trip, I remember being back in the Bay Area and going to salsa class. And I remember there was a semi-attractive girl in the salsa class who every guy used to think is the hottest girl. But when I got back from Brazil after a month, I thought she was like a 7 out of 10, right? Like, it's like, oh yeah, she's pretty cute. And I remember after salsa class, usually people do, social dancing. And I went up to her and said, hey, would you like to dance? And I remember she looked at me and for a moment, she looked around like other guys waiting around. She's like, yeah, we'll see. I couldn't believe it because here I was like being a king in Brazil. And then coming back and just asking for, not even hitting on her, just literally just asking for a dance. And she's like, she has so many options of these orbiters, guys standing around just waiting for her. She's like, yeah, we'll see. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm a pretty high value guy. I've worked on my game for many years. Like, all I'm asking you to do is a dance. I'm not even hitting on you. And she had the nerve to say, yeah, we'll see. Like, yeah, whatever. I have too many options, And I was so mad that day, but after a while, I realized I couldn't really blame her because the ratios were so off in the Bay Area that in her mind, she had so many options that she literally doesn't have time for all the guys that might be cool. So this is how powerful ratios are. And even if you have a good game, just a small, few percent changes in the ratio can really affect the power dynamics between men and women. When I talk about cultural affinity, it means like which city do you want to be in that you really naturally gravitate towards. I love salsa dancing. I love Latin culture. Miami is great for me. If you like the beach, if you like outdoor stuff, if you like the military, San Diego is great for you, It's like, where are the cities that amplify your affinity? A really great illustration of this is if you're a Marvel fan, in the X-Men series, Magneto builds a metal castle on Genosha, right? And the X-Men try to attack him and the whole team gets trapped within metal because Magneto can manipulate metal. And so he built this castle that amplifies his power. I think a cultural adaptation is the same way. You go to a city that naturally celebrates the things that you have that are strong, right? If you are want to be in a think tank, Washington DC is great. If you have coding skills, Bay Area would be great career-wise, right? But if you gravitate towards like upscale French culture, a little bit posh like lifestyle, Paris would be great. London would be great. If you like acting, if you like entertainment, if you like that artistry of like being in front of a camera, LA is great. So where are the cities that amplify your natural energy? I remember one time I was in San Diego, I lived there for a while, and I was just like, oh, these girls are so hot that go to like these Super Bowl parties. And so I went there once and I was like, yeah, football, but I didn't like it. I was like, I had nothing, I don't like beer, I don't like dive bars, I didn't like football, I didn't understand it. And the girls were hot, but I couldn't attract them because they knew like I wasn't having fun. It wasn't coming from like a true place, So the last factor is the socio-economic factor. When I was in Brazil as an Asian guy, in that city there were very few, I barely saw one Asian. I felt like a peacock, like I was special, different. But when in the States, it's just like, I'm another Asian guy, right? So in third world countries, usually if you come from a first world country or developing country, the status shifts. And what I've found is that in first world countries, they're a little bit more racial oriented. But what's funny is that when you go to developed or developing countries, they're more economic oriented. And coming from, traveling with my dad as a diplomat, I noticed that that's because in certain countries, when you have a certain social status, you literally can't. If you fall behind a certain point, you can't get back in. And so people are a lot more sensitive socioeconomically. I would say Brazilians are less racist because everyone's so mixed, but they're socially very sensitive. In these developing countries, if you ever visited or lived in one of them, you can see a high-rise, upscale, 5-star like apartment, and then right next to it, you'll see like shanty towns, literally like trash-built, like hand-built like huts, right? And Brazil and Indonesia, places I've lived in. So socioeconomic factor is a big one, depending on where you want to go. If you're from America, most countries will know that you're from a good place, and you'll be able to get more traction there. All right. Here are some of my experiences per city. San Diego, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. If you like blondes, there are a lot of blondes from San Diego all the way to the OC. And there is a little bit of closet racism there because it's outside of the more cultural areas, it's a little bit more Republican military. That being said, I've dated some amazing girls in San Diego, 2 of which became long-term girlfriends. And it is a big tourist destination as well. So San Diego is great, I think, for visiting, but I think long-term for living, as far as dating goes, I wouldn't be my first choice. Unless you're into the outdoorsiness, if you're into like a chill beach vibe. LA to me is like perfect because it's the cultural center, it's got really attractive girls, but it's also like got the artistry, the energy. Literally when you're in LA, you can feel the creativity in the air. LA, the ratio, there are more men than women, but the city is so big and there's so many beautiful women there that if you run proper game, it doesn't matter. If you have good game in LA, you should get results. Bay Area, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, but in terms of women, the ratio isn't there. In San Francisco proper, it's fine, but as you go down to South Bay, it's really, really bad. It's one of the worst places for dating for single men. I can speak from experience living there for 7 years. New York has one of the highest single female to single male ratios in the country, and model epicenter. It's the only city where you can literally on the street like meet models consistently, right? One of the most beautiful cities for dating. Boston, where I went to college, beautiful college town. It's great if you're in your 20s. As you get into your 30s and 40s, Boston has this like New England like kind of class structure to it. So you really have to know how to navigate that. But Boston, amazing. Miami is really good too. Beautiful Latin culture, beautiful Latin girls, and there's a modeling scene there too. Really good weather, the water's warm. Miami though is small. It's only about 500, 600,000 people, and it's a cultural center, but it's actually smaller than you think, and you start running into the same people over and over again in Miami after a while. And Florida has no state taxes. Italy is very different depending on which city you want to go. I was born in Rome, but Italy's culture is so beautiful. The women are so beautiful, and they have a different lifestyle. They celebrate life, but not all of them speak English. Brazil, the country with the most Victoria's Secret models are from. So obviously there's certain cities in Brazil that are more friendly ratio-wise than others, but Rio is definitely one of them. But Brazil really is like one of the most beautiful countries if you know where to go. Speaking Portuguese will help. A lot of girls don't speak English, some do. that's something you have to get used to. In Mexico, Playa del Carmen is a great place where like a lot of digital marketers hang out. It's got a very beachy vibe, but cute girls. The ratios are good. It's one of those like secret places in Mexico where all the e-commerce digital marketers go. Phoenix, very, very hot weather, but for some reason in Arizona, Phoenix, the girls are super attractive. There's a small model pocket there, but it can be a little bit Republican, not as open to Asian guys, but it's not bad. It's actually got pretty good ratios and maybe worth a visit. Vancouver, Canada, one of the nicest towns. Like the people are super nice. There's a reason Eckhart Tolle lives there. And I remember one time I was with my brother there. We visited a bar, and the bartender, I was having a bad night, and the bartender, she came up, she said, "Are you okay?" And I've never had a bartender do that. It was just a very chill vibe, and some of the most beautiful, nicest girls I met came from Canada or are living in Canada, specifically Vancouver. Toronto and Ottawa are nice too. Toronto is a little bit bigger of a metropolitan city, but Vancouver just has that chill, easygoing vibe. Certain places in Asia, Taipei, Shanghai, Singapore are very multicultural. So if you're an Asian, you can go there, meet Asian girls, but also they have like modeling scenes there too. So you'll meet a lot of times like post-COVID or pre-COVID, there's a lot of people that, there's like these circles where models hang out, and you can find like Russian models, international models. And so those are major cities in Asia that you can visit as well, that you will have success in too. I hope this helps. If you want attraction triggers and actually guides on how to attract these girls once you get to those cities, check out the links below, and I'll talk to you soon.